Welcome to Biz Bites, brought to you by Com Together, helping businesses like yours build their brand through telling amazing stories to engage and grow audiences on multiple platforms.
Okay, all right, here we go. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Biz Bites. And my guest today is a best-selling author. He is an internationally renowned speaker. His business has been going gangbusters, and he's going to tell us a lot more about that. But he's going to tell us all about, I guess, there are lots of things to learn about business from our guest, John Attridge. And look, I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit first.
Hi, Anthony, and nice to be on the program. I started, as you can probably tell from my accent, as an Aussie, born and bred down in Victoria, moved to Queensland in the 70s and began businesses there with varying degrees of success. Over the years, we've moved into many other countries and currently resident here in the UK. So people say, John, how come you moved to the UK? And I say, well, it was for the weather. And I ring people up and they say, well, it was 30 in Queensland and 30 in here, just one's Celsius and one's Fahrenheit.
Absolutely. And for those of us that have spent any time in the UK, we know you are not talking nonsense here. That is the absolute truth. But you do get to spend a fair bit of time in Australia as well. So you get the best of both worlds, right?
Yeah, still got all family down there, my mum, kids, whatever. So we try to get down there for a few months every year.
John, let's just start by talking a little bit about, as by means of a bit of an introduction, talk to me about, the business that I know when we spoke previously, you've bought and sold it, a couple of times over. So tell us a little bit about that business for starters and what your involvement is today.
Yeah, so for those of that are old enough, I was on the Gold Coast. I had a successful car rental business. We had World Expo in Brisbane in 1988, and as fast as I could clean cars, returning cars, the next person in the queue was ready to take off and enjoy World Expo. So we had more than 100% occupancy, Anthony, for a 10-month period, the 6 months of the expo and the 2 shoulder months either side. So it was, what a great business. And, as fast as you could get a car on there, it was making you money. And, I was late 20s and thinking, this business lark is pretty simple. And, you just got to provide the product and everything else goes swimmingly. And, it's all beer and skittles. But fast forward to 1989, all the pilots, for those that remember, the commercial pilots went on strike. And I mean, this wasn't just a strike for a day or two, it was for 5 months.
Mm-hmm.
And it took the then Prime Minister, Bob Hawke, to threaten them with getting back to work. Otherwise, he'd revoke their commercial pilot's license. So I'm not a Labor guy, but Bob Hawke did us all a favour by, the threat worked. And I believe that half of them went back to work and then half were never, ever flying over Australian skies again, not in a commercial capacity anyway. So, but the problem with that, with business, and a little bit like COVID, Mike Tyson once said that everybody's got a plan until you get a smack in the face. And you couldn't see this coming. So we went from hero to zero in the space of, 2 to 3 weeks. We went from over 100% occupancy to almost zero. And we still had all our overheads. We had our lease payments to Mazda and the staff to pay and the rents to pay from our offices. We had no revenue. So we thought, wow, what do we do? This is beyond our control. And I'm a great believer in if you can fix something, get to it and take immediate action. And if you can't, ignore it. So my mental health, I know that's a big one these days, is great, because if I can't fix something, I ignore it. But anyway, that's another story. So we got together with a group. Fortunately, a couple of years before, I'd seen this idea in the United States of what was called a trade exchange. So it was appointing a central record keeper, adopting a unit of currency that business people agreed was 1-to-1, and in this case with the Australian dollar, and we would replace the Australian dollar with our own trading currency, where we could trade with each other, but not one-to-one, by having a unit of exchange. And so we got started with this group with 50 people, business owners, and we had lawyers and dentists and doctors and restaurant owners and hoteliers and mechanics and, tradespeople and all sorts of different people. And so we had our own little trading community going while this was all happening, creating currency that no one else had. So we used to write checks to one another. This was an opportunity to be in the digital age, but in an analog form back in the day. We didn't have internet back then. We didn't have mobile phones or any of that sort of stuff. So I had a car on the driveway. It had Rent Me on it. And the solicitor that was in the group in day one came in and wanted to rent a car for 2 days. It was $50 a day. He wrote me a check for these 100 trade dollars. So I went back as the record keeper, credited my account with $100 and debited his. We gave everybody an interest-free credit line to create an economy, because if you don't do that, no one could make the first purchase. So anyway, that's fine. He's off renting the car. And we then sent 2 people to have legal advice at $50 an hour. So he got 2 new customers. They wrote him a check for $50. So his account went from -100 to -50 to zero. I went and spent my $100 with buying some cleaning rags off a rag supplier to do up a car to sell, to get some sterling or some Aussie dollar revenue, which I needed for some of the things that I couldn't trade for. And so I bought $100 worth off him, wrote a check. So my account went from 100 positive to zero. He's now got 100 quid. So if you do the whole math on that little circle, the rag supplier now has 100. The 2 people that got legal advice owe 50 each. And so, the lawyer was back to zero. I was back to zero. So we call it a debit zero economy. So anyway, one thing led to another. I did a trade sale for a decent figure to a competitor in the year 2000. I took equity as part of that deal. We then floated that on the second board of the AIM here in London in 2011 for a decent size 8-figure sum. And then I was out of the industry for 12 months. And then the actual BBX brand that I represent today, I had helped start that brand back in 1993. Because the founder was down in Sydney and Adelaide, and I was operating primarily in Queensland. And so we had a reciprocal arrangement with those guys. And so as soon as he found out that I was back in the marketplace after my exit period cliff had finished, he got me down to Oz. Spent a week or 2 down there, and then I started the brand of BBX here in the UK 10 years ago. So the group directly branded BBX, as well as through our white label service in the International Trade Association, has grown from 50 accounts back in the day to about 480,000 today.
Wow, that is absolutely amazing. There's so much to unpack there about the journey that you've been on, but I just want to touch on initially as well. I mean, is this, what you were talking about? You're obviously on the birth of what we now terming cryptocurrency, really, isn't it? That's the start of that of how that came about.
Yeah, that thought process. Although we are a digital trade credit nowadays, and so we're a central ledger, just as we were back in the day. But instead of writing checks to one another, it's all done through an app and online, and all the brilliant services that you have to be more cost effective nowadays. So cryptocurrency is really an offshoot of blockchain technology, for those people that understand that. And we are not blockchain. We're a central ledger of debits and credits. So what we'd started 35 years ago is still today. It's just a very more efficient format that allows transactions to take place. Cryptocurrency, which is another method of payment, and that's why I advocate around the world that if you own a business, then you should offer as many opportunities for people to come and do business with you as possible. So in my quiver, I've got cash, I've got debit card, I've got credit card. We've still got a few dinosaurs that use checks nowadays. But why not add another couple in there? Why not add cryptocurrency? Why not add a digital trade credit, other ways of doing business, contras and that sort of thing? If you have spare capacity, Anthony, and that's the key to the whole thing. You know, most businesses stop and measure their P&L. They get management accounts every month. They look at their balance sheet. They talk to their accountant, their financial advisor, but they never stop, firstly, to measure the spare capacity opportunity that is in their business. Most of the people don't even know what I'm talking about. So I then teach them what spare capacity is. We identify it. That's the step number one. We then measure it, step number two. And then we undertake a series of opportunities to monetize that wasting spare capacity. So spare capacity simply is the ability to take on more revenue without increasing fixed overhead. So that's a pretty neat thing. So, and then I say, do something with that and capture it in whatever form. Cryptocurrency is one, digital trade credits is another, and people are pretty familiar with the others.
It's an attractive proposition, really, isn't it? Because it's attractive, obviously, because you've got spare capacity, so you may as well use it. But the fact that you can then use it to bring in other things that will benefit your business is huge, isn't it? I mean, it's like a lot of the time people look at it, oh, I can't really afford that service, but in this kind of environment, A, things can become a lot more affordable, but B, using that spare capacity in order to help you drive the business to grow so you increase your capacity even further just makes sense.
And, I use a case study, and that might help people understand what I'm talking about, because the first time I explain this to a lot of people, it's like Linda Blair from The Exorcist, and I can see the eyes going round and the head twirling. Is by an example. So let's say we have a hotel, and that hotel, just for the sake of the math, has 100 rooms. It sells every room for £100, $100, whatever a night. And it's got, let's say, 70% occupancy. That tells me it's a good business. It's making £7,000, baht, whatever a night. But it's got 3,000 in unsold rooms, 30 times 100. Now, most business owners just say, oh, I had a really good year. I got 70% occupancy and I turned over 3 million. And they're brilliant, but there's another million left on the table. What happened there? Oh, yeah, didn't think about that. If I'll put it on Groupon or do something, sell it for 20 pence in the pound and think that's a good idea. But that's another story. So instead of doing that, the critical thing with spare capacity is not to discount. And, and I talk about it in my book. Discounting really is for people that are lazy, in my opinion. And not only are they lazy, but they're self-destructive because they're bastardizing their price forever.
Absolutely.
And you're also annoying all the people that paid $100 to go and stay in your hotel. Because if they talk to the people that only paid 20 through Groupon, that creates a little bit of interesting feedback. So instead of discounting, you list on my platform and you list your hotel's empty rooms. Now, people from the community come and stay. So you get the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker. They come and stay in a room. And let's say that they've bought 3 rooms of that night. The hotel owner now has 300 digital trade credits and 3 new customers instead of 3 empty rooms. So it's still got some empty rooms, but, I've been able to help fill some of them. 6 things change if they sell some of those empty rooms. And let me just cover them. 3 are marketing, 3 are financial. The marketing things are, the first thing is you've got a new customer in the room instead of an empty bed. So that's got to be a good thing. Second thing is if they like their stay, they might even write a nice positive review on TripAdvisor, tell all their friends, and that might drive traditional revenue in your front door. So, that's got to be a good thing. An empty bed can't give you a recommendation. And then the third thing is they're not staying in a competitor's hotel, running the risk of liking it. And so, how many times have we done business with certain person and for whatever reason we can't, we go and find an alternative and think, oh, gee, that alternative is not too bad. And so you run the risk of losing the business, even if it was an existing customer. So they're the 3 marketing reasons that leaving an empty bedroom is a dumb idea. The three financial is that we've now attracted £100 of new revenue at a cost of a bar of soap, a squirt of shampoo, egg and bacon for breakfast, maybe cleaning of the room. Plus, in my case, the fee that I charge for people to come and stay. When I do that, I get a success fee. That's how I make money. So let's call that 20 quid in total, and I'm being generous, of course, because none of the fixed costs rise. You know, the receptionist still gets the same salary, the chef's on the same money, the rates bill's the same, all the other fixed costs remain unaltered. So I've now earned £100 or $100, and it's cost me 20 to earn. I now go and spend that on buying some marketing, paying an accountant, doing some window cleaning, going on holiday, whatever I spend discretionary money on. Even though I'm spending 100 digital trade credits, it's really only costing me 20. So I'm getting an 80% discount without having to ask, and I'm preserving the price of my product up front. So that's a great financial benefit. Imagine everywhere you went, you'd be able to write yourself a discount for 80% without asking. The second thing is, if you've got a balance sheet and you want to loan money, the additional revenue counts one for one, goes through your books. It's not a tax dodge in any way, shape or form. You put it through as regular revenue. It counts as an asset in your balance sheet, so you'll get better lending rates as with a stronger balance sheet. And then finally, Anthony, you hit the nail on the head. When you go to sell your business down the track, then you get a greater sale price and therefore multiple of EBITDA, because the additional revenue counts through your books as revenue multiple. So there's 6 pretty good reasons that leaving an empty bedroom empty is a pretty dumb idea when you've got an opportunity to do something about it. Now, if you don't care, then that's another story. So 3 motivations people have in business in order to get a better result that we work with. First of all, they want to grow their business. They've got to have spare capacity, which most businesses have. They want to grow their business. They want to get a better lifestyle from running the business, because if you could earn another $500 a week and you could spend that on going on holidays, giving your kids a gift or whatever it happens to be, because you can spend digital credits personally. So a better lifestyle. And then the exiting for more at the end. So they're the motivations. So if you don't have any of them, then stop this podcast right now, because anything I say after this will mean nothing to you.
Well, you definitely have to have those motivations, and it makes so much sense with all of this. I wanted to ask, though, a little bit about the recognizing capacity, because it's a really interesting idea of knowing that. And I think all of us who have been in business know sometimes when it's like we get a deadline and all of a sudden, it's amazing how quickly we can get things done when there's a quick deadline, which sort of points to the fact that perhaps there is more capacity than what you need. I mean, there is that theory, isn't there, that things take as long as you give them to take. And so capacity there may be a lot more capacity in there than perhaps what you realize, but that's the key, isn't it? Actually being able to recognize that.
Yeah, so you can stop and measure it. There's a mathematical formula. It's on my website. If you want, it doesn't matter what sort of business you have, you can go in and calculate that. But everybody has it. I was speaking to a media company yesterday, and these are 20 million turnover business. So these are a decent sized media company. And the guy said, I don't think we have spare capacity because we fill every issue. And I said, well, let me ask you, when's the next issue go to print? And he said, next Thursday. And I said, if I rang you up with camera ready, art ready to go, could you throw another ad in today? And he went, yeah. And I said, there you go. You've got spare capacity. You just didn't know it. And people can be busy. We're not saying that you have to be sitting around idle. You can, and you pointed that out. You can be busy. I've got a wide format sign and print business that I am an NED with. And when we get a massive order in, you just get pizzas in for the guys, and you might give them a bit of overtime. But during the course of the day, they can probably double their regular production that happens in a regular day. If you're a web designer, you can always squeeze in another job, even if it's and you're upfront with the person and say, look, this might take 2 months, and if you're prepared to wait, I can squeeze it into my downtime. So everybody has the opportunity that has the motivation to do something with it.
I love it, because you're absolutely spot on with that. Part of it is the motivation, really, isn't it? But it's what goes through your head immediately when you start thinking about that is how busy we are at being busy. And a lot of that can be offloaded if you unlocking your capacity and you're trading it for other things. There are opportunities. I mean, I think I'm not different to any other business owner in that I know I spent part of today doing things to try and generate more work coming in. But yet there are probably better people qualified to do a lot of those things. And I'd rather be doing some of the things that I, love doing, like sitting here having a podcast. And so there you go. That immediately points to capacity, doesn't it?
I talk about that in the book as well. And it's focusing on the stuff that you're passionate about, Anthony, and you're great at. I've got a client that I was working with last month, and, they love doing all the parts of their business. They're in a floral business. And I was speaking, and Tilly said, "Oh, I love this business. I've been in it 13 years, and it gets me up out of bed and motivated of a morning. The only day I hate is Fridays." And I said, "Why?" She said, "I have to be in the shop all day, and I'm doing accounts for most of it. And, it's really, I hate it." I said, "Why don't you outsource it to an accountant?" "Oh, yeah, you can't afford it." I said, "Well, hang on, let's have a look at this. Have you got any flowers that you ever throw away at the end of the day?" "Yeah, every day." "Oh, how much is that worth?" And we worked it out. It was like £100 worth on average. So I said, if you could sell that into the community, you get £500 a week that you could then pay a bookkeeper, and you could then focus on Fridays of getting out with the girls and doing whatever you want to do, or be in the shop or whatever you like doing, and pay digital trade credits for the bookkeeper to come in one day a week. And she went, "Oh my God, I've been in business here all these years and it just didn't occur to me." And so her life's almost changed significantly in the last month or so since she's been outsourcing the books. Yeah, she still has to have a little glance every now and then, make sure there's no faux pas that have gone on. But she's outsourced a task that not only was she hated doing, but she was bad at it. It took her ages. Because what she was doing in a whole day, this guy comes in and does it in 3 or 4 hours, so that's an example.
It's huge. And I know I've had been down that path myself when I started off in business for a number of years, struggled to do the basic bookkeeping tasks and getting the the BAS in and all of that sort of stuff. And I was terrible at it. I made mistakes at it and I hated every minute of it. I've got a bookkeeper that I've now had for some time, and we meet on a semi-regular basis to make sure that things are in line. But that's a small conversation instead of me actually doing all of that stuff. And how great is it that you can trade what you do love doing for and what you've got the capacity for to cover that cost? It just makes so much sense.
In the hotel's example, if the hotel owner did that, then they'd get an 80% reduction in the price of the bookkeeping by selling some empty rooms. So that's right on the money. So there's plenty of things. The three main things I talk about in the book are doing something with spare capacity. The other one is Stephen R. Covey's second habit of highly effective people, which is starting with the end in mind. And if I'd have known that many, many years ago, I would have saved myself a lot of time, money, effort, and energy. And then adopting Richard Koch, who wrote about the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule, which is a fascinating read. And it changed my life about 25, 30 years ago. When I focused on doing the stuff, and the outsourcing came as a result of that read. So what that basically says is focused on the 80% of tasks, the 20% of tasks that drive 80% of your revenue. And that involves sacking bad customers, but there's another story. And that frees you up with time for your good customers. I had an interview. I did the world's first 24-hour non-stop Global Insights Inspiration Fest when COVID struck back in 2020. Because part of the other thing with our community, not only is you save money, you get new customers, but we have a LinkedIn type profiling system where the only difference between us and LinkedIn is that every owner on our platform owns the business. So it's owner to owner contact rather than owner to random. And I had a guy called Kevin Byrne on the show because we did 60 interviews and plugged them into a 24-hour non-stop show to give small business owners a little bit of hope and inspiration when COVID was at its highest. And so we had webinars, seminars, and we had an expo that went on after the event. We had thousands on that. So it was a good show. But one of my guests was Kevin Byrne, who was the founder of Checker Trade here in the UK. Kevin started the little business on his kitchen table, and the idea was, how do you find a decent tradie? And I know that's another rings, doesn't matter where in the world you are. And again, that's another story. So he started this thing called Checker Trade, which was a recommendation and a forerunner to a lot of the TripAdvisor type platforms, but was interactive, where the buyers and sellers could rate one another. And he said one thing, and he ended up selling it, by the way, for £78 million. That's like 120 million Aussie dollars. So not a bad little idea, one-man band, and away he goes 20 years later.
Bit of pocket change.
Down his couch. Yeah. So he said, dropped just one little nugget in the course of the conversation. And he said, most people spend 80% of their advertising budget on new customers. He said, I spend 80% of mine on my existing ones. And I went, man, there's a profound statement. And again, that's another story, but that's using the 80-20 rule, which is a little bit counterintuitive than what you first think. But I can assure you that is a decent strategy to have a little look at. But one of the points I'm making is that because we're part of a massive business community, you meet some fascinating people, and business is a lonely place at times for a lot of people. And if you can take away that loneliness, share an idea, with people that you don't feel as though can threaten whatever it is that you do, you pick up some little nuggets in there that are just so invaluable. So that's the other point to my community.
Well, I should point out as well that to everyone, and we of course will include some links to it in the show notes. But Business Blunders and Bloody Good Ideas. It's a great title for a book that you've written there, and I think part of what you've been speaking to now obviously speaks to the title and speaks to all of those things. I gather the book came from all of these experiences that you've had accumulated over this period of time, and it's put you in demand as a speaker as well, hasn't it? I mean, that's the other big thing that you're doing. Tell me a little bit about that, because plenty of people aspire to be speakers. But what's got you in demand? What are the things that people want to hear the most about?
Oh, I think it's the actuality, and just one small thing. It's been business blunders and bloody great ideas.
Oh, yes.
So we've even stepped it up another level. But people want. I've been around the world in the last 2 years. I've been speaking in Las Vegas, in Australia, in Dubai, here in the UK, and a lot of people in business. It's a lonely place, and the sad statistic is, and this is based on Peter Drucker. Anybody wants to Google that name? That Peter made the observation many decades ago that 92% of businesses are product-led, and their entrepreneurs are product-led entrepreneurs. Only 8% are sales-led entrepreneurs. So what that means is that only 8% of people love and enjoy sales. And the sad thing is that if you have a business and you have a business and idea and you don't have sales, you don't have revenue. And if you don't have revenue, you've got a hobby. And that's the statistics. So were that 80% of sales-led businesses succeeded and only 20% of product-led businesses succeeded.
Wow.
So that is a pretty, silent and deadly number if you do the analysis on that. So what I speak about is the three main things, as I say, is adopting 80-20, starting with the end in mind, and then doing something with spare capacity. That's usually the theme for my addresses. I usually also like to involve the audience, which frightens the poo out of some of them. But because I've dealt, Anthony, my business community has over 1,000 verticals, and I've met with people that have done just about everything I can imagine, and you too. If I looked at the old yellow pages in the index, I've had a conversation with an owner of that business over the last 35 years. So you get to know how a business runs, where its spare capacity is, what its fixed costs are, what are some of the dumb things that people have done, what are some of the bloody great ideas, like the one I shared with Kevin, for instance. And so why audiences seem to attune to me is that I like telling stories based on fact. These are my real experiences of real case studies with real businesses, with real business owners that I've met. And I share some of those stories in a 20, 30, 40 minute on stage performance, depending on how long I'm booked for. So what I think the most thing is that I say to everybody, buy my book. Unashamed plug. But if you don't get one great takeaway that you can implement immediately, then come and send the book back and I'll give you your money back. I've never had to do it yet. Whether they're just too embarrassed, I don't know. But no one's come back to me, and no one's thrown rotten tomatoes at me either. That's another plus. So the core message is I've heard many speakers, and you can tell almost immediately they're reading from notes or they're following some slideshow, and you think, oh God, how can I get out of this? Because I can go and read that, Google it. You won't be able to Google my information. That's the key, I believe. Well, even if you read the book, it doesn't contain, because I can go off on little tangents, as I've probably demonstrated now. Someone will just spring a keyword at me and we'll go off on a little rabbit hole for a minute or two. So I think that's the reason, Anthony.
And, to me, that's, one of the reasons why we connected originally, and we had an extensive discussion a couple of weeks back. And I think that it's very much about those authentic stories which differentiate you in the marketplace. I mean, that's the lesson for business itself, isn't it? Because what makes you different from your competitor is your ability to tell those meaningful stories. So what you're actually demonstrating on stage is what businesses should be doing anyway. It's why I love this particular medium and why we can have this kind of open discussion, because there are so many twists and turns that we can go down. It makes it interesting and unique.
My only thing is I have to be kept on track to time. Otherwise we can look down and it's 4 hours have gone past. But anyway, that's
well, we won't give everyone the 4-hour podcast, but we will make sure that we're going to do this again, I'm sure, in the future. But I did want to ask you a couple of other questions as well. And one of the things that you were sort of alluding to there when you started talking about the kind of the different way of looking at the 80-20. And, it's very interesting to me about how you say about the people that don't love sales. I hear that all the time, and I'll put my hand up and say it's not my favorite thing to be doing either. But I guess that's the interesting part as well, is that the way that you've developed the community means that you can avoid some of that as well, because you can bring people in to help you do some of those different areas that you may not love, and do it at a cheaper price.
And 100%, and that's what community is all about. And then the other myth that keeps getting propagated around the world at the moment is that you can never sell anybody on the day. You've got to develop a know, like, and trust relationship, and it's got to be there, and you've got to hug them and kiss them and cajole them, and over a period of 6 months get to know them intimately, and then you can do business, which is a whole lot of garbage. That it depends on the need and your solution. Mm-hmm. So, if you had someone that was drowning in a river and you came along with a life vest and said, the life vest's $100, do you want one or not? Then you can do a sale immediately, my guess. And I know I'm being a little bit emotive with that. But so long as there's a fit, then sales doesn't have to be this nice cup of coffee, canoodling process that takes years. And by the time you get there, you're gone broke. That's just another little conversation.
No, and that was where I wanted to pick up as well, because I think I've had this conversation with a few different people that sales is changing, right? That particularly I think in Australia, and I'm sure it's very similar in the UK, whereas it seems to be a little bit different in the US, in that we generally speaking don't like being sold to anyway. and we often can see through those things. And so we know when we're being sold to, and we're all educated enough, generally speaking, to understand the processes and what's being attempted to happen here. It is, I think, is changing the way that those conversations happen, and that narrative happens, and that talking to that need and that emotive part is, as you say, becoming more and more important, because that's really trying to work out and say, is this really a priority for you? And it's a question of people coming to you and being ready to buy. It's just a question of what to buy. And I think that's the kind of the Apple example, isn't it? Because the majority of people that walk through an Apple store are going to buy something. It's just a question of what, not whether they will buy or not.
And the old days of having a sandwich board on your back saying "buy my stuff" down the street, it does work. There will be a small percentage of people that just happen to want to buy whatever it is that you're selling on your board. That's why direct mail still works, bizarrely. Snail mail is making a comeback, by the way. There's a little tip. Because everybody gets flooded with emails. When you get a nice little coloured handwritten envelope arrive on your desk, what do? You open it. So there's just a little tip for someone that wants to play.
I should say I'll do a little cross promotion there for a previous podcast episode with Greg Smith from Send Handwritten and Buntu, as it's now called, because that's what they do. And if anyone hasn't heard or listened to that episode, go back and have a listen, because he's got some gems in there about that. Because absolutely, some of these older things are getting cut through because everybody thinks that they've got to move to the latest and greatest.
Yeah, well, I've still got a pair of green flares and purple platform shoes just in case they come back, and I've been hanging on to them since the 70s. But that's another story.
Lucky we're not doing video here then.
Yeah. So one of the things with sales, yes, some of the old methods still work, but it's more about disqualification nowadays, Anthony. So I advocate disqualifying prospects. Most salespeople try and flog your stuff, and it's like the guy down with the sandwich board, buy my stuff, which are totally unqualified. So I've moved down the pathway, which is what we've always done, by the way, but just not so many of us. But it's moving towards trying to push you away from me, right? If you don't qualify, you don't own a business, sorry, Anthony, I can't help you. I might be able to introduce you to some people that you might make some friends with, but I can't help you. If you haven't got spare capacity, I can't help you. I'm sorry, I've done a measure, I can't help you. And I'd rather do that and be upfront in that process, because every time I can't help you, you get the other reaction. Every time you push someone away, they come closer to you, bizarrely. It's like money.
Yes.
People that try and make money is just, I've never ever, and this probably sounds gloating, but I've never ever chased money. I've always moved away from it and chased what I have to do, and it always chases me, bizarrely. I know, and I know that's another story, but if I go down that one, it'll sound too conceited, and I don't want to do that. So, but with sales, the more you push people away, the more they come to you, because if nothing else, you can always give them a recommendation. So I always look to people on the B2B level, at least, that if I can't help you, I tell you I can't help you and why. And ask who I can help. And those, even the people that I can't help, become some of my better referrals, because they then know someone that I can help. So there's another side conversation.
And it's always about timing too, isn't it? I think you alluded to that. It's understanding that sometimes I think that people want to make it a priority for someone when it clearly isn't, but that doesn't mean that the timing won't change. So why burn your bridges? And
we've got our drowning person. They had life jackets that they walked past in Kmart and whatever other place that they went to for the last 30 years. But if we come along in a rowboat and they're in the river and they want some help, and I'm selling life jackets, I bet you I make a sale.
Yep.
So it's not the fact that they never disliked life jackets. It's just that the need wasn't there disproportionately to $100. I could probably offer $1,000 and still make a sale if it was at that critical moment.
Yes, and that is absolutely the truth, isn't it? Sometimes it's we believe that money is the obstacle, and clearly isn't. More often than not. And I've seen that myself with a few things in recent times where people have said, oh, they're thinking that money's the obstacle, and suddenly something happens and they're paying an absolute arm and a leg for it because they needed it, and that's you know that's a lesson for all of us in business, because pricing is the hardest thing to do at times, to work
Yeah.
that out.
Yeah, create a toilet paper shortage in Australia and then see what price means to the purchase.
We did that during COVID.
Well, I know, that's what I'm saying. So as soon as there was a shortage, what happened to the price?
Yeah.
Up it went, and there were queues of people trying to buy it at a higher price.
I still look back on that in absolute amazement that absolutely happened. But and I think that will be one of the things. I think the next generations who look back on that COVID period, who haven't lived through it, will just shake their heads and go, "Did that really happen? How did that happen?" It was strange.
But a perfect example for supply and demand and price.
Absolutely, absolutely, John. Just before we wrap up the main part of the podcast, there are two things that I wanted to say to people. Is that stay tuned, because John and I, if you're willing to subscribe to our bonus bit of content, John and I are going to have a little discussion about exitable businesses, because it's been something that he's been involved in and done extraordinarily well. I can say that properly. Out of. So that's in the bonus content we're going to have. But I just wanted to wrap things up a little bit, John, and just go back and say, you've been on this amazing journey, and you're clearly enjoying what you're doing, because financially speaking, you probably don't have to do it, and that's something that everyone aspires to. But take me back to the John in high school. What was the objective to want to be, and what would you go back and tell him these days?
Oh, wow. I had this economics teacher, Mr. Kaplan, and he taught me two things. One was gambling, which is, people would be horrified nowadays. I used to go back to his house and he'd give me $10, and I'd go down the bookies and put some bets on for him, because he was trying to teach me.
I was just going to say, I can totally relate to that. I had a maths teacher who went on to become a bookie. So, I hear you.
So, well, my uncle, John Attridge, same name, was one of Melbourne's premier bookmakers. So maybe it runs in the family or the genes somewhere. The other thing he did, we had this competition on at the beginning of the year in economics in buying shares. And we all were given $10 at the beginning of this process. And this is, it must be Form 4 or 5 maybe. And I chose Mr. Whippy, and I put all my $10 with Mr. Whippy. Mr. Whippy was 1 cent. And I thought, for no other reason, I was going to get a lot more shares. So if it went up, I'd get a bigger multiple. And at the end of the period, Mr. Whippy was at $1.42.
Oof.
And at the end of the 10 months that this thing went on. So I had no influence over it at all. I had no reason to buy it, other than it seemed like a good multiple at the time, because if it went up a penny, I'd double my price. Clearly, I won the share competition by some, 400,000% or something for the next person. This was all monitored by Mr. Kaplan. But going back to school, I think the difference is, and I'm on the board of a thing called Let's Localise, which is an international charity headed by Joe Foster, the founder of Reebok. So Joe's the chairman, I'm on that board. And Joe only sold his business for a little $4 billion exit. So, people might remember the name Reebok. And Joe and I have got very similar thoughts on the school system at the moment, that it's unfit for purpose. And, we've got a series of well-meaning educators, and that's right through to university. We've got a system that encourages our younger people to get off and get a degree. And it's like, buy my stuff. We're trying to shoehorn people into the wrong thing. And so two things have changed. I think education has become more and more online, and therefore less real and less case studies, because the old teachers had case studies of what they used to do. They gave us practical things that we could use. And I'm not suggesting gambling and investing in the share market is the best example of this, but they gave us practical things that we could do to transit from an education into business or into working life. And I think we're losing a lot of that today, and for a number of different reasons. I had a young person come to me recently at a job fair, and he had a baseball cap over his eyes, and he was coming for an interview. And I said, can you just tilt your cap up so I can see your eyes? And he says, I don't think I'm comfortable doing that. And I thought, oh my God, really? I felt so sorry for the guy. It's just our education system at the moment needs a whole lot more back to the good old days of practical case studies, observations, insights, inspiration, leading from some perhaps business people that have been there and done that too. Because I think, business people leaders have got some responsibility to take, because most of the educators nowadays, you don't see many that have been out in a business and then moved into education. Most of them have come through the education pool, so you've never left school. So I'm not having a rip at anybody, but that's... So getting back to the question of my upbringing, the old analog upbringing, I don't think did me any harm, and it taught me some entrepreneurial activities that have stood me well during the years, albeit there was certainly not that intention at the delivery point.
I love it. You've taken advantage of so many opportunities that's been in front of you and learning from them, but now giving it back to the broader audience in so many different ways. I'm looking forward to the extra bit of content that we're going to make available to people. Just a very brief chat on how to make your business more exitable. We're going to have that conversation in our bonus content, and there'll be links to be able to access that. But in the meantime, for this part of the show, John, thank you so much for being a tremendous guest. There's so much that we can learn from you. I can completely understand why people should be reading the book and why you're such an in-demand speaker. And you've been very generous with your time, and I appreciate it.
It's been my pleasure. And if we can help just one person do business better, then we all get a better result out of that.
Fantastic. And thank you everyone for listening into Biz Bites, and click on the link to get the bonus content.
Biz Bites is brought to you by Together for all your marketing needs, so you can build your brand, engage audiences on multiple platforms. Go to comtogether.com.au, follow the links to book an appointment for a free consultation.